The moon hung low over the rolling fields of Pine Hollow, casting a pale silver glow across the two-lane county road. It was just past midnight, and the town had long since gone to sleep. Sheriff Tom Granger and Deputy Lisa Monroe were cruising in their squad car, the faint hum of the engine blending with the distant chirping of crickets. The dashboard lights painted their tired faces in a soft green hue, while the occasional flicker of headlights from a passing truck momentarily illuminated the car's interior. Tom sipped from a chipped thermos, the smell of burnt coffee lingering in the air. Lisa, riding shotgun, was flipping through a small notebook, joking about the never-ending saga of raccoons raiding old man Weaver's chicken coop. They shared a quiet laugh. These late shifts were long and often dull, but moments like this made the silence bearable. The radio crackled, breaking the calm. Dispatch came through with a report. A local called in about strange noises and flickering lights near the abandoned McAllister property on Ridgeview Road, property no one had lived on for years. Tom raised an eyebrow, glancing at Lisa, who shrugged, half amused, half intrigued. Ghost stories surrounded the McAllister place, especially the crooked outhouse out back, which kids in town swore was haunted. It was probably just another prank, they figured, but protocol meant they had to check it out. Tom made a slow U-turn, gravel crunching under the tires. The cruiser's headlights sliced through the fog as they drove toward the edge of town. Lisa clicked on the spotlight, sweeping it across the empty fields as they passed. The road narrowed, and trees grew thick on either side, their branches clawing at the sky. Neither officer spoke now. The radio was silent. A sense of unease, subtle but growing, settled between them, though neither would admit it. Ahead, the outline of the McAllister house began to emerge from the mist, dark and still, with the crooked silhouette of the old outhouse barely visible just beyond it. The first rays of dawn filtered weakly through the thick morning fog as Deputy Ray Collins pulled up to the edge of the McAllister property. The call had come in barely an hour ago. A concerned local driver reported an empty sheriff's cruiser parked on the shoulder near the old homestead, engine still running, lights flashing in the dark. Ray stepped out of his truck, boots crunching on gravel, the air damp and heavy. He hadn't expected to find anything serious. It wasn't unheard of for the sheriff and deputy to take a quick break on rural patrols, but as soon as he laid eyes on the abandoned cruiser, a knot twisted in his stomach. Both front doors were wide open. The driver's side door swung slightly with the breeze, creaking like a warning. On the ground nearby, Tom's thermos lay tipped over, dark coffee soaked into the soil. Lisa's flashlight rested a few feet away, its beam flickering erratically, barely illuminating the wet grass. The police radio crackled to life, a burst of static followed by the dispatcher calling out to Tom and Lisa again and again. No response. Ray moved cautiously, hand resting on the grip of his sidearm as he scanned the area. The McAllister house loomed ahead, its frame sagging with age, windows broken, the porch half collapsed. Behind it stood the infamous outhouse, half hidden by tall grass and brush. The air smelled stale, with an undercurrent of rot. Ray called out their names, voice echoing through the fog, but no sound answered him, no footsteps, no voices, not even the rustle of movement. It was as if the world itself had stopped. He made his way to the house, stepping carefully over broken boards and vines that snaked across the ground. Inside, he found nothing, just empty rooms filled with dust, cobwebs, and decay. No signs of a struggle, no overturned furniture, no blood. It was the same outside near the outhouse, just silence. Everything was still, too still. Ray radioed for backup and cordoned off the area. Within the hour, more units arrived. They searched the house, the surrounding woods, the nearby creek. Dogs were brought in. Helicopters scanned the fields. But nothing, no footprints, no drag marks, no sign of a scuffle. It was as if Sheriff Granger and Deputy Monroe had stepped out of their vehicle and simply vanished into thin air. News of their disappearance spread quickly, sending a ripple of disbelief and fear through the small town. A seasoned sheriff and his deputy didn't just disappear. People whispered theories, but in those first uncertain hours, no one could explain how two officers had entered that property, and left behind nothing but silence. At the heart of Pine Hollow, the small-town diner buzzed with a strange, uneasy quiet. The clink of ceramic coffee cups and the low hum of conversation filled the air, but something was off. The usual morning chatter about weather, crops, and school board meetings had given way to whispers and sidelong glances. The disappearance of Sheriff Tom Granger and Deputy Lisa Monroe had spread like wildfire through the community, and now every booth held a theory, every patron carried a flicker of fear. Marge, the diner's owner for over 30 years, stood behind the counter pouring coffee with slower hands than usual. Her eyes kept drifting to the window, as if expecting to see the missing cruiser roll down Main Street any minute. She'd known Tom since he was a teenager helping his father bale hay in the summers. Lisa, bright-eyed and ambitious, had been the first female deputy in the county. They were both known, trusted, and loved. The idea that they had simply vanished felt impossible. At the corner booth, 3 retired farmers leaned in close over half-eaten plates of eggs and bacon. One of them, Henry Reddick, spoke in a hushed voice, "That old McAllister place, there's always been something wrong with it. My brother swore he saw lights out there years after it was boarded up." His companions nodded slowly, the kind of nod that comes not from belief, but from a desire not to dismiss anything anymore. At the sheriff's office, the mood was no better. Deputy Ray Collins sat at Tom's desk, staring at the wall where the 2 offices' duty schedules still hung, unchanged. Across the room, the phone rang constantly, reporters, neighboring departments, and anxious townsfolk offering help, tips, or superstitions. Ray jotted down every detail, no matter how far-fetched. A hunter thought he'd heard shouting in the woods days earlier. A teenager claimed the outhouse was cursed. An old woman said she had a dream, saw Lisa standing in the dark, trying to speak but no sound coming out. Outside, yellow tape fluttered in the wind around the cruiser, still parked by the side of the road. No one had dared move it. Flowers had started appearing nearby, daisies, wild sunflowers, a tiny wooden cross hammered into the ground with trembling hands. It had only been a day, but the town was already mourning, as if they knew. As if they felt, deep down, that something final had occurred. The local newspaper ran the headline in bold print, "Sheriff and Deputy Disappear Without a Trace, Mystery at the McAllister Place." Below it, a grainy photo of the squad car with the doors wide open, the mist curling around it like fingers. People clipped the story and pinned it to their fridge doors, circled it in red, shared it over fences and at church. Some said foul play. Others, more quietly, suggested something else, something older, hidden in the bones of the land. In town hall, the mayor held a press conference, her voice trembling as she assured the public that everything was being done. "We will not rest until Sheriff Granger and Deputy Monroe are found," she promised, even as her eyes betrayed the same haunted uncertainty the entire town now carried. As night fell again over Pine Hollow, doors were locked a little earlier. Lights were left on, and no one, not even the teenagers, dared go near the McAllister property. Not anymore. A thin layer of dust covered everything in the Pine Hollow Sheriff's Department archive room. Rows of rusted filing cabinets, old metal shelves bowed under the weight of yellowing boxes, and a faint musty smell that clung to the air like a forgotten secret. The overhead fluorescent lights flickered, casting a dull, ghostly glow over the space. Most officers avoided the archives unless they had to. Too many old cases. Too many cold trails. Deputy Aaron Whitfield, barely 2 years on the force, stood at the center of it all, holding a worn box marked Granger MONROE 2009. He had heard the story growing up, like everyone else in Pine Hollow. The sheriff and his deputy disappearing on duty had been a turning point for the town. People changed after that. They locked their doors tighter, stopped trusting as freely, and the McAllister property had become a place only mentioned in hushed tones. Some called it cursed. Others said it was simply a tragedy no one could explain. But Aaron wasn't one for superstition. He believed in facts, evidence. In this case, despite being 16 years cold, still nagged at the edges of his curiosity. He set the box on a metal table, wiped his hands on his jeans, and opened it slowly. Inside were faded photographs, police reports, interview transcripts, and a few personal items. Lisa's notebook, Tom's cracked watch, a Polaroid of them both smiling beside their cruiser. Everything smelled faintly of mildew and time. Aaron sat down, carefully sorting through the documents, noting how thorough the investigation had been. Dozens of interviews, search grids mapped out in red ink, expert consultations. But still, no bodies, no signs of foul play, no witnesses. Just nothing. One item caught his eye, a black and white aerial photo of the McAllister property taken by a drone the week after the disappearance. It showed the collapsed roof of the barn, the sagging house, and the lone outhouse standing near a cluster of bare trees. He stared at it, wondering why no one had ever followed up on something so ordinary and yet so out of place. An annotation in the corner read, "Outhouse shaft checked, surface only. Ground too unstable to excavate without collapse." Aaron flipped through the notes from that part of the investigation. They'd assumed the outhouse was empty, just an old, dangerous structure, not worth the risk of digging into. It had been visually inspected, but the ground was soft, soaked from spring rains, and no one had thought to return later. In the months that followed, the search had expanded further and further from the property, until interest waned and the town quietly let the case fade into the background of its collective memory. He leaned back in the chair, brow furrowed. It bothered him, how something so simple had been left unresolved. How quickly the attention shifted away from the center of the disappearance. Maybe it was time someone went back. Not with rumors or ghost stories, but with tools. Drones. Ground-penetrating radar. Maybe the answers weren't buried in the woods or lost in town gossip. Maybe they were still right there, under the outhouse that nobody wanted to touch. The silence in the archive room pressed in closer, the kind that felt almost sentient. Aaron carefully packed everything back into the box, except for the aerial photo and a few key pages of notes. He tucked them under his arm, turned off the flickering light, and made his way up the stairs, unaware that the decision he had just made would reopen a mystery Pine Hollow thought it had buried long ago. The early morning fog clung to the trees like a shroud, thick and silent as Pine Hollow began to stir. But on the outskirts, near the cursed McAllister property, the silence was different now, tense, fragile, as if the land itself was holding its breath. The once forgotten outhouse was gone, its remnants cleared away. In its place stood a forensic tent, a temporary altar over the resting place of two officers whose fates had haunted a town for 16 years. The investigation was still active, but something had changed in the past few days. Whispers had begun again, not about the discovery of bones, but about who might have placed them there, and who might still be walking free. Inside the sheriff's office, Ray Collins sat at his desk, a steaming mug of coffee going cold in his hand. His eyes were fixed on a new file spread before him, Daniel McAllister. A name that had been buried nearly as deep as Tom and Lisa. He'd been 26 in 2009, reclusive, jobless, living in that dilapidated cabin in the woods. Interviewed once. Released. No fingerprints found, no connection made. But now, fresh eyes had started connecting threads missed before. Daniel had disappeared just 3 weeks after the investigation wound down. No forwarding address. No work history. It was assumed he'd left the state, until last night. A license plate check had flagged a vehicle registered to his name in a nearby town, just 40 minutes away. Parked outside a rundown auto shop. The shop owner had no clue who Daniel really was, said he went by Danny Moore, paid in cash, worked odd hours, lived in a trailer behind the building. Ray had read the report twice. It didn't feel real. After all this time, could the man responsible for their deaths really have been that close? With backup secured and warrants in hand, Ray and Detective Clara Raines led the raid just after dawn. The sky was still dim when they arrived, tires crunching over gravel, headlights cutting across the tin-sided garage. It all happened fast. Officers shouted. Doors were kicked in. Daniel McAllister, older now, beard thick and gray, stood frozen in his doorway, a mug in hand, wearing a blank expression that chilled Ray to his core. He didn't run. He didn't ask why they were there. When Ray slapped the cuffs on him and read his rights, Daniel just whispered, "Took you long enough." Those words hung in the air long after he was shoved into the back of the cruiser. At headquarters, the interrogation room buzzed with quiet intensity. Daniel sat at the table, hands folded, as if he were the one doing the interviewing. No resistance. No panic. He spoke slowly, deliberately, and never once denied what he had done. He talked about the night Tom and Lisa came to the McAllister house. Said he'd seen their lights. Watched them split up. He waited until Lisa was out of sight, then lured Tom to the barn, pretended to need help. The rest came out in a blur of half confession, half justification. He claimed they were snooping where they shouldn't. Claimed the land didn't want them there. That the property had a memory. That the house told him what to do. Clara leaned in. The house told you. He stared at her, unblinking. You don't live in a place like that for years and stay the same. It whispers, shows you things, tells you who doesn't belong. Whether it was madness or manipulation, they couldn't tell. But the details he knew, Lisa's last words, the way her flashlight fell, the pattern on Tom's belt buckle, were things no outsider could have known. His chilling recollection confirmed what the town had only feared. It had never been an accident, never a mistake. It had been murder. Cold, planned, buried under earth and silence. Word spread fast. News vans returned. The local paper's front page ran with a new headline: Killer caught after 16 years, justice for Granger and Monroe. Candlelight vigils were held outside the station. Lisa's mother, now frail and hunched, stood beside Tom's brother, tears glistening on her cheeks as she whispered, "They can rest now." But not everyone found peace. Not Ray. Not Clara. Because tucked deep in the evidence Daniel left behind was something else, a notebook. Full of drawings. Diagrams of the McAllister property. Notes about other visitors. Dates. Names. Some of them crossed out. Others not. One entry, dated just 3 years ago, read simply, "She came again. Just like the others. I watched her go into the woods. Haven't seen her come out." There had never been a report filed. No missing persons case in that time frame. But now there would be. The McAllister land had given up 2 of its ghosts. But perhaps it wasn't done yet.